Gary Westford, who with Julia has curated an exhibition of, it sounds like mostly your stuff, Gary, but maybe with one or two exceptions, pieces from your collection, which had been just about completely installed at Bethel Woods until COVID hit. And so we're getting a sneak peek today of the exhibition. And before I dive into that and introduce Julia and Gary in a little more detail, I just want to welcome you all, of course. And I want to let you know that this is an ongoing series of programs we're doing that we call Mystery Tube. This is episode 4. Episode 5 will be next Wednesday. It'll be at the same time, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And I'll let you know at the end of the show who next week's guests are, so you have to stick around for that. And obviously, you know, with trips, the thing we like to do the best is have a live show at the Hall of Flowers, or a live show. In the past few years, we've been doing it at a brew pub on Alameda. And we can't do that now, so we're doing these episodes. We hope you enjoy them. But, you know, we're still doing what TRPS does. And one of the things we do is we give away money, and we give away money specifically to poster artists who are, you know, having a rough go of it. Right now, there's a number of them who have lost all their gig poster work. And so in the last 12 months or so, we've given away about $20,000. And that's you know, it's a good start. And it's because people like you who are watching become members of TRPS and allow us to do programming that builds up our Artist Relief Trust Fund, which is where we get the money to send money to poster artists. So we thank you for your memberships in the past. If you've been a member, we encourage you to renew or do it again. All you got to do is go to trips.org and click any of the membership buttons or links on the site, and you'll be led through a little process. It's only $30. And yeah, so we appreciate your help and allowing us to help the artists who, you know, give us so much joy. So today we've got a lot of joy in store. We've got this great show that Julia and Gary have put together, and I want to thank them for being here. If you want to find out more, by the way, about Bethel Woods Center for the Arts, just go to bethelwoodscenter.org. It's pretty easy to find. If you forget what I just said, just type in Bethel Woods and rock and roll, and you'll probably end up there if you do a search. And Gary Westford has a website, garywestford.com. He's a great painter. I encourage you to check out his work. It turned out I knew about it before I knew who Gary was, so that's kind of cool. Julia is a curator at Bethel Woods, and she's the co-curator of the show we're going to be talking about today, called Lights, Color, Fashion, Psychedelic Posters and Patterns of 1960s San Francisco. And Gary is not only an artist, but he's also been a collector, having lived in San Francisco in the late 60s. And he collected posters early on, and in 2017, he gave 80 of those posters away to the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco. And about 28 of those posters were included in the DeYoung Summer of Love exhibition. So you may have seen Gary's name on a little card somewhere on a wall. And if you're interested in Gary's interest in rock posters, I invite you to check out an article we published at trips.org in 2017, when Gary had a show up in Salem of part of his collection. And if you go to trips.org and type in Gary's name in the search box, you'll find a number of links, one of which will take you to that article, which is brilliant. So without further ado, I want to ask Gary and Julia to please take over the show.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you to yourself and to TRPS for having us tonight. Really excited to be here. I'm also really excited for this exhibit, which was supposed to open last year, but stuff happened. So what's one more year of waiting? We've actually been planning this exhibit for a few years, and I'll hand it over to Gary to talk about how the idea for the exhibit got started.
You bet. And first of all, I want to thank you, Ben, for all the great work you do. And TRPS, it's always a pleasure and a joy to go to San Francisco and visit with you and all those great poster artists and the people who support poster making. So having said that, I'm also honored to be working with Julia Fell. She's done a spectacular job with the orchestration and the installation of this exhibition, and I could not be more pleased. In 2017, as Ben mentioned, I organized an exhibition of posters and fashion at the Halliford Museum of Art, which was very, very well received during that time. And subsequent to that, I made basically a blind proposal to the museum at Bethel Woods, to the then director Wade Lawrence, who was right out of the gate really enthusiastic about doing this show and gave us a green light. And then, in the last couple of years, especially in the last year, we've all struggled with the issues related to COVID, but we are now at a point where in the spring, we're going to bust a move and open this show, and it's full tilt boogie. It's going to be a great, great show. And I'm so pleased to be taking the West Coast San Francisco Revolution back to the side of Woodstock. It doesn't get any better than that.
We're so excited to get to link the two coasts too, believe me.
Yeah. So we're showing posters. We're showing 22 examples of fashion from the era. We're showing original photographs from the era. We're doing an 8-hour soundtrack that utilizes music ranging from psychedelic to blues and soul, because those musicians were represented on Bill Graham's stages. We're doing a super Bill Ham light show that Julia's going to talk more about. And we're also going to do a very cool blacklight poster show that is, I guarantee, is going to blow people away.
So I think without further ado, I'm going to start sharing my screen so that we can see some images of what Gary has just mentioned and talk about them a little bit more.
Great.
So let me just get this set up.
While Julie's setting it up, I'd like to say that I moved to San Francisco in 1968, and I moved to the Lower Haight, and I immediately began to go to concerts and collect posters. And at one point in my apartment, I had 25 posters on my wall, and I was 22 years old, and I said to myself, someday I will do something with those posters. And fast forward, a dream come true. They're on the walls at Woodstock, and that is cool.
It's very cool. So before we get into the images of the exhibit, I do want to just reiterate that, it is an exhibit technically still in progress. We got it about 90 to 95% of the way installed before we weren't allowed to go back into our building anymore because of COVID. But I think that's given us a really beautiful opportunity to show a little bit of what an exhibit in progress looks like. So I'm going to hit next, and we will see your first look at our gallery, where the art's on the walls and the light show is playing, but there's some unfinished plywood plinths there that will eventually have fashion on them, and you can see some other stuff going on in the background. But yeah, this is where we dropped everything back in March. And it's really exciting that it's almost all the way done and that we're going to get to open it pretty soon. You can see a few highlights here that we'll get into a little bit more depth more in depth later, including the Wilhelm light show, which is front and center when you first walk into the gallery. And we also have collections of posters from the Avalon Ballroom, the Family Dog, and from Bill Graham's Fillmore that you can see there on either side of the light show. Although we're not going to go into too much detail about those because we want to give you some incentive to actually come see the exhibit. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Gary, before we move on to the next slide?
There, you can see clearly that we're also going to be featuring several of the spectacular neon rose posters, which they're going to be around hundreds of years from now. They're so beautiful.
They really are. I was also tickled to find out that you can look at a few of them with 3D glasses on for a special effect. So that's something that we're really looking forward to being able to share with people when it's safe to do so, 3D glasses.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say on the back wall, we have a number of Bill Graham's Fillmore posters, and then to the left, a family dog.
Right. So I also wanted to continue to show a little bit about that exhibit development in progress. So what we are looking at here are actually my elevations that I worked on as we were designing the exhibit. These were done in Adobe Illustrator, which is just a fantastic tool for doing scaled blueprints, essentially these scaled elevations. And these were documents that I was able to share with Gary as we were going back and forth and making decisions about how the exhibit was going to sit. And I think that doing these elevations and being able to share them digitally with Gary, who's 3 hours away, I'm in New York, was a really invaluable tool as we were able to collaborate together on this exhibit.
Yeah, I'm in Oregon. Yeah, I'm so glad you're showing these because it really demonstrates how important it is to spend time with the organization of these exhibitions. We worked really well together, and actually I think edited very few posters, but the changes we made were very nuanced in many ways, but resulted in a really wonderful exhibition. You can see there at the bottom of the image on the right that there are the 22 examples of fashion that are included in the exhibition but haven't been installed yet. So this was a great process. I really enjoyed it, and obviously as visual people, it just made complete sense to see where things are going to go.
Yeah, it's been wonderful working with Gary on the exhibit design process and on this program, and hopefully on more collaborations in the future as we have the exhibit open. It's been a great partnership. Like you said, very visual people. We've been on the same wavelength about a lot of things, and I think we have a similar amount of pride in how the show came out.
Total.
So I'm going to go ahead and move on to talk about some of the pieces that are actually in the show. And the way that we're going to be moving through the slides is also the intended flow for the exhibit. So on the first wall here, I'm just going to explain what we're looking at, and then I'll let Gary talk a little bit about some of the individual pieces. We started off with wanting to give our visitors a grounding in poster art before we exposed them to the rock posters. So what we have are the artistic influences and also some progressive prints of the poster making process.
I taught art history for many years, and so as I've thought over the years about the development of psychedelic poster design and various art movements of the era, it became clear to me that we had two huge art movements, especially during the 1960s, that of pop art with recognizable imagery that was appropriated by artists of the era like Andy Warhol, and also an orientation toward op art done by great British artists like Bridget Riley that you see there on the upper right. And also hugely important, the influence of Art Nouveau, especially with poster makers like the great Alphonse Mucha. And you see there at the top left an original poster by Alphonse Mucha, who that poster is not in my collection. It was donated for this exhibition by two of my friends from the Portland area, Dan Bergsvik and Don Hassler, and I want to thank them for that donation. That in and of itself is worth the price of an admission just to see that spectacular Art Nouveau poster. Right below that, you can see in 1967, the Arc from Sausalito, Big Brother and the Holding Company, which utilizes the same image that you see there in the poster above it. In the center below Andy Warhol, we have a great poster by the Hells Angel Gut, who did a great Ben Franklin poster for the Grateful Dead at the Carousel Ballroom, and then the exquisite FD 57 by Victor Moscoso that uses his, my recollection, he's trained at Yale with Joseph Albers as a colorist and color theory artist, but also is using imagery and references to op art illusion that resulted in that masterpiece. To the right there, real quickly, you can see 6 progress proofs for FD, I believe, 29, done by Mouse and Kelly, which also springs from an Art Nouveau poster. So just a little taste of how these early poster printmakers like T-Lautrec worked to develop a beautiful print like the one you see there.
And I just want to say that I was so thrilled to see all the Art Nouveau influence in these posters, and to have the opportunity to have that Mucha print is one of the greatest pleasures of my curatorial experience, to be honest. I'm a big Art Nouveau fangirl, so it's really lovely how that style has influenced the posters of the 60s that we get to show off in this exhibit.
Yeah, and by the way, real quickly, that Big Brother Arc poster is a spectacular psychedelic poster. It's in my top 10.
All right, so I'm going to head on to the next slide. And as I mentioned with this one, we wanted to give our visitors a bit of a grounding in poster art. And in the next slide, we have photographs that we placed here to help give visitors a grounding in the world of the 1960s San Francisco by highlighting sort of the who's who of that scene. These are photographs also from Gary's collection by photographers Joe Sia and Gene Anthony, and they highlight some of the performers whose music is highlighted on the posters and will be in the soundtrack, as well as some other important figures, including on the bottom left there, photograph that shows the poster artists themselves, which is one of my favorite pieces in the exhibit.
Yeah, these, goes without saying, photography is, of huge importance as an art form, but also in terms of, in this instance, obviously documenting the era and, having us get a chance to see who these people were. You see Grace Slick there, and of course, Hendrix and Janis Joplin, but also great African-American blues musicians, Black musicians like B.B. King and Albert King and Muddy Waters. And to the right there, Miles Davis, who played with the Grateful Dead. I am really sorry that I missed that show. But, Ken Kesey, Tim Leary's there, and also to the left, Chet Helms and Bill Graham. And so I'm really happy that we included these photographs. That they add a tremendous amount of depth to the show. Absolutely.
And as Gary mentioned, we have some African-American performers, and that dovetails really beautifully with the Bill Graham Fillmore posters. Bill Graham was noticeably dedicated to showing diverse artists on his stage at his venues. And I think that that's a really important narrative for us to touch on, that this was really a merger. This was an explosion of diversity that was kind of just getting started. And Bill Graham was a key player to that.
Yeah, I think about, going to a concert with Jefferson Airplane and Big Mama Willie Mae Thornton. I mean, that's heavy duty stuff, and hats off to Bill Graham for bringing that great music to mostly white audiences in the 60s.
Absolutely. And then head on to our next slide, which is just a sampling of some of the posters that are in the show. I've selected these images to share because I feel that it shows the breadth of the types of posters. Obviously, we have, I think it was upwards of 70-something posters in the show, perhaps even more. This is only 4 of them, but you know, we have highlights from some of the big 5, like Wes Wilson, Rick Griffin, and Victor Moscoso. But I also wanted to point out that we are featuring art by some lesser known and significantly a female artist, Nancy Parker. There were people who were doing really brilliant work outside of the big 5 that we've also made an effort to recognize.
Yeah, one of the posters I want to just talk very briefly about is, of course, one of the most well-known posters of the psychedelic era by Rick Griffin. And, you know, obviously many of us in the audience are aware that up until the advent of the psychedelic poster beginning around 1965, that posters were made in a boxing style. And the boxing style was simple, it was geometric, and it allowed for clear information about what the venue was, who was playing, where it was, and very straightforward. And boxing posters on their own have a tremendous beauty to them. But when you look at a poster, well, any of these, but especially in this case, Rick Griffin, he blows the doors off what poster making is about, to the point where you really have to spend time, which was part of the game back then, to read these posters, to even find out where the venue was. And so this is a Grateful Dead poster. You can see that elegant script there, Grateful Dead, right in the center of, in front of the sun. And then some of Griffin's, you know, references to organic, you know, the earth itself there, you know, springing from the earth there, those strange looking trees, if you will. So just real briefly with Nancy Parker, I know very little about her. If anyone in our audience does, that'd be great. She did a number of op art oriented blacklight posters during the 1960s. And this is, for my money, a Full Tilt Boogie op art masterpiece of blacklight work. She's a great, great poster maker.
I wanted to also quickly add, as I mentioned, I wanted to highlight Nancy Parker because she's a female artist. We are also featuring artwork by Bonnie McLean, and want to recognize that both she and Wes Wilson passed away earlier this year, which, you know, is just devastating, but feel so honored to be able to share their work in this exhibit and honor their legacy.
Absolutely. We also have a great poster by Mary Tepper as well, and did some really wonderful work.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit more about Bill Ham and his light shows. I'll just start off by saying that I had the immense pleasure of getting to speak with Mr. Ham on several occasions as we were developing this exhibit. It was very clear from the beginning that his work was essential and needed to be included in this show. And getting to speak with him was just such an honor and such a pleasure. The way that he speaks about his art and told stories about the 60s was so interesting and inspiring. And the phrasing that he used to describe his work, like kinetic painting, is something that just really sticks with me. And the immersive and impermanent nature of the light show is just so fascinating. So I feel very, very lucky that Mr. Ham has lent us his work to include in the show. And I'll let Gary tell you a little bit more about how special this work is.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually greatly honored to meet Bill 4 or 5 years ago at a TRPS festival, and we adjourned to his residence, longtime residence, and had a wonderful conversation. And I'm so honored that we have Bill included with a major light show presentation. It goes without saying that the light show environments that were created for these dance halls, these were incredibly important to creating this immersive environment within this dance hall framework. And Bill is really on the ground floor of producing incredibly beautiful and sophisticated light shows. There were certainly others who are also at work, who did spectacular work. In particular with Bill, he's very much influenced by abstract expressionist painting, which came from the 40s and 50s, of course, a major art movement. And really, you know, his work is really equivalent to liquid visual abstract expressionist painting. I think a case could be made for that. They're absolutely stunning. The display that we'll have that was that Bill included for us is really a great light show. And so, you know, it goes without saying that if you want to talk about San Francisco dance halls in the 60s, you have to talk about Bill Ham and those other great artists who were at work during the time creating these spectacular light shows.
Right, and you know, the still image here really doesn't do justice to how beautiful the art is, and it also needs to be paired with music. And really, we have a slam dunk soundtrack that will be playing throughout the exhibit. And in case you feel like, you know, just letting your hair down, we also have put a dance floor right in front of the light show. So we hope that everyone who comes to see the exhibit will let loose a little bit and really enjoy themselves while taking in this beautiful art.
Cool.
Okay, so this section is a little bit of a departure from the music posters. This section is all about social activism and social awareness. It includes a variety of posters about gatherings and demonstrations and social causes. And this was also, from the beginning, it was very apparent that we needed to include this type of work because while San Francisco was all about the music, in one respect, it was also all about the social awareness. It was a very key part of the culture. And I think nobody can probably describe that better than Gary. So I'll hand it over again once again to Gary.
Yeah, thank you. It was really important for me to include, in addition to these great rock posters, these posters that were made by major poster artists who are addressing the really complex socio-political issues of the time. So I guess I would begin by saying, first of all, the revolution of the 1960s kicks off with The Human Being from 1967, with a powwow poster that you can see there. And then in January of 67, and then to the right there, a large format Monterey International Pop poster for that event that blew open the doors for the music of the 60s, if you will, with Hendrix and Janis Joplin and so many other great performers, Ravi Shankar, etc. It was really important for me to include these, given all the profound socio-political issues we dealt with in the time at the time, of course, racism, the ongoing war in Vietnam, the beginnings of the Earth Environment movement, and the spiritual movement. And so here's a number of posters that address those issues, including a poster there featuring Martin Luther King that was done for a Fillmore benefit concert a couple of weeks after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And to its right, a great poster by Wes Wilson for a benefit headlined by Quicksilver Messenger Service for the Cesar Chavez Farm Workers Union. And then a poster there, a resist poster from the College of Marin from 1967, related to the anti-war movement. Did you want to talk a little bit about the poster on the far left, Julia? The Desiderata poster, or Ben, you want to chime in on that? Or?
Well, when I first saw this wall, I was just struck by the mix of spiritualism and activism. The spiritualism represented by the two posters on the far left, and the Sister Corita Kent, I believe was her name, and then and then also the anti-war as well. So for me, it always seemed like the impetus for being anti-war came from spiritual places and came from, a place of valuing peace over violence and conflict and such. So it seemed very much of a piece that it was here, that those posters were here.
Yeah, Julie, do you want to talk about that Native American presence?
I do, yeah. I want to make note of the fact that two of the posters on this wall, the powwow and the wilderness conference, as well as various other posters in the show, make use of Native American imagery, which we have made an effort to recognize can be or was appropriated. It's not uncommon to see Native American imagery in art and in fashion of the 1960s, as the counterculture was very focused again on that spirituality element, as well as the environmental movement that was starting to pick up in this sort of back to nature mentality that was going on. So we just wanted to make a quick note of the fact that there is Native American imagery in some of this art and the complex cultural associations that go along with that.
Absolutely.
All right. I think we could probably spend a whole lot of time talking about this wall. There's so much to unpack here, but in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next slide, where we enter into a bit of a different take on the psychedelic patterns of the 1960s. Before we start talking about the fashion, which is a huge section, I did want to touch on this display case where we have some more commercially available items where psychedelia has left its imprint. I really love the Playboy magazine. The cover was done by Wes Wilson, and we have a few other objects which Gary can go into more detail about.
Yeah, well, on the far left there we have Country Joe and the Fish and Quicksilver Messenger Service vintage albums, and the album, which is making a comeback, as you know. The information that was transmitted image-wise on these album covers were waited for with great anticipation by all of us who love this music of the day, and so the art form of the album in and of itself is absolutely worth incorporating within this exhibition. And then psychedelia permeated the culture. Julia mentioned the Playboy cover with the bunny there, Playboy bunny. And then above that, you can see a vintage Mad magazine, which says on the cover, turn on, tune in, and drop dead, instead of Tim Leary's famous quote. And I think I got that right. But then on the far right, Victor Moscoso was also very early on involved in the underground comics movement. You see a Zap comic book on the upper right there. And then a second example also done by Victor, who was spreading his wings with, making great comic book art as well.
Right, and before we move on to what else is on this wall, I want to just orient where we are in the gallery. So right now, the platforms that the fashion will be installed on are actually behind you as you look at this wall. So we will we'll start talking about the fashion. And I know Gary's got a story about one poster.
Julia, one thing really quick. A visitor is pointing out that the Playboy magazine cover was not done by Wes Wilson. It was probably an homage to Wes Wilson, done in the style. Thanks, Andy, for that comment. That was my mistake, because I think I had said I thought Wes did it, but obviously it was done in the style.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention that the Quicksilver cover, I forget the name, and maybe somebody who's watching knows, I forget the name of the artist who did the painting that was the source, the main image for the cover, but George Hunter of the Charlatans, I believe, designed it. Yeah, so if I'm wrong about that, please let me know.
Well, we have lots of people who have lots of knowledge out there, so.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll look into that Playboy cover and correct any inconsistencies there.
Yeah, I think it is true. It's in the style of West, definitely.
Yeah.
On the right there, you see 4 examples of posters that make reference to fashion. And on the left there is a poster done by Wes Wilson in 1967 for a high-end young woman's psychedelic boutique that was on Union Square called Bally Low. Early in the game in the 60s, Bally Low was a ticket outlet for the venues in San Francisco. In 1969, I moved to San Francisco in 1968. In 1969, I got a job working as a salesperson at Bally Low with a lot of very cool, hip, young designers. I was not a good salesperson, but I certainly learned a lot about fashion, and I have a particular personal interest in fashion as it manifests itself across time and culture. So it was really an eye-opener for me to work selling basically high-end, beautifully designed psychedelic fashions for young women that a typical, quote, hippie on the street could have never worn. And so part of our exhibition has to do with the range of fashion styles ranging from street fashion of hippie street fashion, if you will, which is magnificent in and of itself, all the way up to examples of fashion, which are haute couture. We come to a point in time where for one of the first times in fashion history, high-end designers are learning from what's going on in the streets, whether it's San Francisco or London. There is an explosion of fashion in which you do your own thing. And that was one of the absolute marvels of the era. You know, the Charlatans came on stage wearing, Wild West wear or roaring 1920s or Victorian era dress. And they were at the on the ground floor level, if you will, of allowing young people of the time to say, hey, dress the way you want to dress, wear what you want to wear. And so, young people went to fashion stores, secondhand stores. The poster next to the Bally Low is from a great venue, boutique on Haight Street called In Gear. Some of our viewers may be aware of from back in the day. So it was really important for me to include posters that literally come from the fashion of the era.
Exactly. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that and look at some examples. But before we pull away to see some fashion, I did just want to point out, going back to the exhibit design process, that the pattern on this wall I'm particularly fond of. It's pulled directly out of one of the photos that we saw earlier in the exhibit of a light show. So I pulled that design right out of that photo and was able to transpose it and project it onto this wall for us to take out and paint. And I'm just really pleased that we were able to make that happen. Again, going back to the whole light show and how important that atmospheric element is to the concert halls, having that light show projected image, literally we projected it before we painted it, was really special.
It's very cool.
So here we have some of the examples of the fashion that will be on display. And I just selected 3 as sort of representatives of the 22 that will be out. And they kind of run the gamut, as Gary mentioned. We have everything from the hippie street fashion to the haute couture and everything in between. The outfit in the middle is our street fashion. It's a handmade shirt with embroidery and pants that were available for retail. Very accessible for the average person. And then we have on the right, Betsy Johnson, who's still a very recognized name in fashion design. Her sweater dress here influenced by the mod fashions coming out of Europe, as well as the op art designs that we spoke about earlier, Bridget Riley, and these alternating lines and color blocking. And then on the left there, we have an outfit that is sort of a bit of a middle ground. It's from a boutique in San Francisco. It's very well designed and put together, but it's drawing all of these influences from street fashion with the paisley pattern and the flowing design. And so I'm very excited that we get to really show such a wide variety of fashion that plays off of one another so pleasantly as well, to see all of these together. Even though they come from different spheres of accessibility for the average person, they really all complement each other very nicely.
Yeah, it was such a wide open era in our history culturally, and it certainly manifests itself in so many approaches to fashion. Not only, street fashion, people wearing what they wanted to wear, combining different styles together from different eras. Obviously, the use of paisley and tie-dye is hugely important, wide leg bell bottoms, lots of embroidery. And, culturally, references to African-American culture in the form of the dashiki and kaftans from India, and talked a little bit about the huge importance of Native American influence. Part of it certainly appropriation, but another part of it being tremendous admiration for Native American culture and a position of honoring the earth and respecting the environment. Although I think it's fair to say that most, young people, myself included, knew really very little officially about the struggles for Native Americans during that time and earlier in our history. So, I guess I would say it's, maybe a naive homage to the greatness and the profound complexities of Native American culture and African American culture. That were manifest. The other thing I would say is that we try to include a number of fashion, again, so wide open. And so there was a futurist component to style and fashion, so sort of referencing minimalism. And there was a country gypsy, sort of like the one you see from Mr. B's of San Francisco. And also, we have an example of a dress from Young Innocence, which basically is a riff on a Renaissance medieval style of dress. And, it's absolutely just, the dress itself they're beautiful. They're beautiful examples of fashion from the era.
Right. And something that I love about fashion is that there's just an endless amount of interpretation, and it's so indicative of who a person is. It's one of my favorite things about fashion. One of the reasons I'm so excited that we're able to include fashion in the show, because it's so personal. It really says a lot about not just the overarching culture that it's a part of, but about the individual. And I think it allows for anybody to really step into history by imagining what it would be like to wear this clothing. We all wear clothes, or at least most of us do. So I think clothing is really, really wonderful access point to history. And I'm so glad that we're able to provide that access point in the show.
Yeah, and just real briefly, bringing a three-dimensional component into the gallery with all this absolutely stunning two-dimensional work it's win-win as far as I'm concerned.
I completely agree. Not to mention the fact that having these human forms in the gallery in front of the posters and in front of the light show brings a bit of that element of the hustle and bustle and the human element into the art.
You bet.
In a quite literal way. So the next slide is actually going to be our last slide, and it's very cool. We're going to start talking about the Blacklight posters. We have a room. It's a separated off area of our gallery that's just for the Blacklight posters. And the pictures, I have to say, I think turned out pretty good, but they really do not do justice to how beautiful these posters are in person. It just blows my mind every time I look at them, how vibrant and clear they are. I mean, to me, it's like looking at something on a high definition television screen. It's just that incredible.
Absolutely. Of course, in the 60s, blacklight posters came to the fore as artists and designers began experimenting with phosphorescent inks. And blacklight posters continue to be made today, but one of the things I will definitely say about these posters from the 60s and early 70s is they're printed with extremely high quality and in some cases hand printed and very, very, very rare. So as I began to think about the era, it wasn't rocket science to land on, I would like to include blacklight posters in the exhibition. And as Julia said, the first time that I saw these posters under a contemporary state-of-the-art blacklight bulb, I was completely floored. And you get some sense of what these posters look like in this beautiful small gallery. I think there are 12 blacklight posters. You can see one of the posters on the top image on the right there is a large psychedelic question mark, which is actually produced by the United States government as an anti-drug poster. Will you use drugs or will they use you? Is certainly an important question to ask, because as we are well aware, one of the downsides of the 60s was, the use of drugs to ill effect, and certainly a lot of cases. At any rate, these posters also are manifestations of the culture. On the lower screen on the right, you can see a mandala, which actually is the heads of the 4 Beatles in a circular pattern, a love and peace poster, posters that honor Native Americans and Black Power. It's very hard to see, but I want to point out on the upper right screen, at the far right, there's a poster. It's a very, very rare poster. As far as I'm aware, there's maybe 1 or 2 in existence, and it's a poster for a concert that was done in 1967 that featured Joan Baez and Judy Collins and the Chambers Brothers at a venue at Big Sur. It's a wonderful, very rare poster and hand printed, and I'm just delighted to include it in the exhibition.
We're so lucky to be able to have this little breakout gallery dedicated to just the blacklight posters and really have them literally shine under those lights.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and one final thing actually in this gallery is the blacklight dress that we do have separated out from the rest of the fashion so that it can show in its full glory under the black lights. I just love this little mod mini dress that really it glows. It's beautiful under those black lights.
That is my recollection is that was a hand printed dress. I collected it a number of years ago, and from a vendor, and it's beautiful, beautiful op art dress.
I can imagine that would be sought after today.
I think so.
All right, well, that is the last slide that I have. And I hope that everyone watching has had a great time and will consider visiting us when travel is safe again, when the exhibit is open, which hopefully will be very, very soon. And Gary, do you have any other closing remarks before we take questions?
Well, I want to thank you, Julia, and Wade, and Robin Green, and the staff at Bethel Woods for orchestrating this exhibition. It's a dream come true for me. It's a very important exhibition. It carries forward, in my mind, not only the visual images of the era, but also the backstory, which is, the importance of making inroads into the issues that confront us sociopolitically, because it goes without saying that the 1960s was a revolutionary period of experimentation, but also of concern about an end to war and the environment and racial equity and equality. And I will take that to any bank in the world. Thank you.
And I think I'll just close out by saying that it's been such an honor to work with Gary, and thank you, Gary, for sharing your beautiful collection with us. I think we shared the ideal that this exhibit will be educational, and at the very least that all visitors will leave thinking about something in a new way.
Thank you. And thank you, Ben and TRPS.
Sure. Well, thank you. There've been a couple of questions while we've been talking. Maybe I'll ask them now if that would be okay. One question, there was some interest in drugs. One question was about posters with drug imagery. I can think of the David Singer poster with all the secanols on it. Are there any drug imagery posters in the show?
Oh, excellent question. Certainly alternative consciousness posters. I mean, I think of David Singer's imagery, and not necessarily that he was overtly thinking about drugs, but, you know, metaphysical equivalents for, you know, alternate states of consciousness. I mean, he's a master poster maker. I can't think of specifically of a poster off the top of my head. Maybe Julia, you can. I certainly have a few in my collection, but I can't recall that I've included them here.
I think I could think of two things. I mean, there are various mushrooms in some of the posters, including the Rick Griffin one that we were looking at a little while ago. And I think that there is one poster that has the Family Dog logo on it with, I think his name is Chief Emmett. It's got a joint.
Oh yeah, it's Zigzag.
Yeah, Zigzag, that's it.
Does that qualify? I think it does.
Yeah, I think so. And just to return to that really, in my opinion, hilarious anti-drug poster from the U.S. government that was in the Blacklight room, which doesn't technically contain drug imagery, but kind of does also.
The other question, there's a couple of questions. One was about the Big Sur Blacklight poster. Do you know who did it? That's
an excellent question, and to my recollection, it is unknown. I'll tell you a real quick, cool story about that poster. I bought it from Mike. I'm blocking his last name. Major poster vendor.
Storm?
Thank you. And this is a cool story. I purchased it from him 5 or 6 years ago, and Mike told me that he had been given that poster by, I'm going to blow this, I know, but I think his parents were babysitters for Judy Collins, and that's how he got the poster. Okay, and Mike, if he's watching, he could set me straight on that, but that's a very cool poster that came from Mike Storm.
Okay. Another question is about the fashion from Arlene. Were some of your the pieces in the fashion part of this show, were they also in the Summer of Love show at the De Young?
They were not. No, that was Jill D'Alessandro, is the curator at the De Young, who orchestrated that spectacular component.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this will be a new look for people.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Another question I've always had about the black light posters is, does exposure to black lights degrade the blacklight poster? Is there anything about the compound in the ink or whatever that kind of, for lack of a better term, wears out?
That's a great question, and I've never read anything in the reading or the research I've done on blacklight posters that would indicate that that's the case. And it goes without saying, sunlight is not good for posters.
Right.
Sure, but it's a good question. And Julia, do you have any take on that or information?
No, I don't. But I will say that the blacklight posters, just like all of the rest of the posters in our show, are only under light when the gallery is open. So the lights are only on them during our open hours. So they've been installed for the past year, but the gallery has been completely dark. So just like any artwork, exposure to the world is going to slowly degrade it over time, but we do everything we can to protect arts while they're on display and while they're in storage.
Right. There's that great Wes Wilson poster for Otis Rush and the Grateful Dead that has the swirling figure. And that poster is notorious for fading with exposure to light because of some of the fugitive inks that were used. Mm-hmm. So they're hard to find in pristine color condition. Many of them have faded. So that's one case where that poster is very delicate.
So the variable may well be the ink rather than the, you know, the black light in particular on a black light ink.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I honestly don't think there's an issue. I mean, there's not one that I'm aware of. It's a good question. Yeah.
Another question for you, Gary. You know, in the late '60s, when you lived in San Francisco, how did you collect your posters? I'm assuming you went to some shows and got them that way, but did you like go to head shops? Did you go to the poster mat, or, you know, whatever poster stores were open? Did you take them off of telephone poles?
I never did a telephone pole. Well, thank you for the question. It's a great one. I went to the early concerts that I went to. They would actually give you the poster for the next week.
Right.
And I got a couple that way. A number of the posters, because I lived in the Lower Haight from 1968 to 71. And so, you know, I would walk up to Haight-Ashbury. And in one case, I bought 2 posters from a head shop that was closing in about 1969. And I paid $1.50 for each one. One of them was FD 26, Skeleton and Roses, and the other one was the original Monterey Pop. And so it's one of the few times where I've made a good investment that has returned significantly. But in answer, I had, by the time I left San Francisco in early 1971, I had 35 psychedelic posters. They were all on my wall in my apartment. And that's how my collection began. And then, you know, short story of life carried on. And then about 10 years later, I really began to revisit and think about the era. And because, you know, I was a young artist at the time, and visual imagery has always been important in my life. But, you know, right out of the gate, I was really aware that these posters were special, and that there's a reason why they're shown and included in museum exhibitions all over the world. You know, the best of them are going to stand the test of time. And, you know, I mean, we're not going to forget about Victor Moscoso. You know, we know that, and many of the other poster makers.
Yeah. Julia, did you have any? Julia, did you have any other final comments or questions for Gary?
Oh, okay. I always like to ask people what their favorite things are. So I'm going to ask Gary, what's your favorite piece of fashion that we have in the show that people can look forward to seeing?
Oh, boy. Well, I think one of your answers to a similar question was, well, I like everything. You know, refreshing my memory, there is a beautiful 2-piece, a vest and a miniskirt that actually comes from England, and it is leather. It was handmade and with appliqued sun images on the back. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just an exquisite, if I could say, hippie 1967 uber cool dress. There's also, I very much like futurism and, you know, a la 2001. And there are a couple of examples of very minimalist dresses that are included that aren't officially psychedelic, but they are exquisitely beautiful, beautifully designed dresses. And so I'd go with those as well.
All right. All right. Well, it's about 6 o'clock, and I really appreciate the two of you putting the time into this, and I hope we can get out to upstate New York soon and see this show. And I want to thank you both for joining us on Mystery Tube. And I just want to remind people that you should go to trips.org and click the membership button, and keep your membership current so we can keep giving money to artists via our Artist Relief Trust Fund. And I want to also add that next Wednesday at, I believe it's the 16th at 5 p.m. 8 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have a special episode of Mystery Tube with Brad Clausen, Todd Slater, and Ken Taylor. And all three of those contemporary rock poster artists are going to be live with us, and we hope you'll join us and hear what they have to say and ask them a couple of questions. And until then, I thank you all for participating, you watching, and of course, Julia and Gary and everyone behind the scenes. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon.